I'm a board member of the Brazilian Internet Steering Committee, and I hold a PhD on law and technology. And I would like to thank the audience, both online and in person here in Riyadh. A special thanks to the expert panelists who have kindly agreed to share their ideas and thoughts on this topic today. The workshop, titled The Construction of Collective Memory on the Internet, will last for 90 minutes. To make the most of our time, we will follow this discussion format. Each speaker will have 10 minutes to present their ideas. After that, we'll move to a question and answer session, prioritizing interaction with both the in-person and online audiences. Finally, the panelists will deliver their closing remarks. So, let's get started. Memory is a vast and complex topic. It becomes even more complex when we think about the relationship between memory and the internet, in preserving memory, promoting social memory, and constructing memory itself. This workshop aims to foster a debate on the challenges of preserving memory in the digital environment. It seeks to explore how the internet and digital technologies can serve as tools for preserving, promoting, and constructing online memory, especially in a context where much of our culture, social, and political processes are mediated by and even originate on the internet. Memory preservation on the internet involves tackling issues such as preserving the integrity of information, countering disinformation, protecting the right to information, promoting underrepresented cultural heritage, preserving multilingualism, and much more. We often say naturally, everything is on the internet, but is everything on the internet? Feeling frustrated at not being able to find information online seems to be becoming more and more common, whether it is a news page, a blog, tweet, and etc. Content on the internet can disappear for different reasons. Online materials can be deleted. Vanishing information is a reality. And a study conducted by the US-based think tank Pew Research Center Research that suggests that a quarter of all web pages that existed at one point between 2013 and 2023 are no longer accessible as of October 2023. In most cases, this is because of individual page was deleted or removed on an otherwise functional website. For older content, this trend is even starker. Some 38% of web pages that existed in 2013 are not available today, compared to 80% of pages that existed in 2023. So 23% of news web pages contain at least one broken link, as do 21% of web pages from government sites. News sites with a high level of site traffic and those with less are about equally likely to contain broken links. Local level government web pages, those who belong to city governments, are especially likely to have broken links. So, given this context, this workshop aims to address some questions. What are the challenges brought by the internet and the digital platforms to the preservation of collective memory? How do these new challenges relate to the promotion of information integrity, the protection of right to information, the promotion of underrepresented cultural heritage, and other issues traditionally debated in the internet governance field? We'll start the discussion with Maria Elza Oliveira. She is online. She is the chair of the advisory board of the E-Government Institute at the United Nations University, a former director of the UNESCO Communications and Information Sectors Division for Digital Inclusion, Policies and Transformation, where she led the support member states to strengthen capacities for access to information, digital inclusion, digital transformation, and protection of documentary heritage. Before I call Maria Elza, I would like to introduce our moderator. Unfortunately, I won't be able to be here at the whole panel due to crossing agendas with other panels of IGF, but I would like to introduce a very important person for us that will be on my behalf moderating this panel. He is Juliano Capi. He holds a master's and a PhD in communications from the Pontifical Catholic University of São Paulo. He is the manager of the Brazilian Internet Steering Committee Advisory Team. He coordinated the creation of the Center for Studies on Information and Communication Technologies, the CITIC.br, the UNESCO Regional Center for Studies on the Development of the Information Society, and the Brazilian School on Internet Governance, the EGI. And I would like to introduce and to raise their names, last but not least, Jean Carlos Ferreira dos Santos, Tatiana Gereissati, and Juliana Oms, without whom this panel would not be able to exist. Thank you so much for your hard work on this topic. So, Marielza, thank you so much for being with us, our dear friend. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Bianca. Can you all hear me well? I hope so.
Yeah, we do.
Okay, great. Thank you. And it's so nice to see you again. And it's nice to be with the CGI colleagues and all the colleagues around the room and on the internet that are participating and watching this panel. I think that this is one of the most absolutely relevant topics that we could be discussing, because the internet is really changing the way we think about, and record and recall our own memories. It's changing it completely, and it has done that from the very beginning. When we started, and we started accumulating some information online, and when the browsers, first browsers came around, we don't, we stopped really thinking about um, memorizing things, because we could always find it on the internet. It was just about, oh, you can Google it. It's literally, the browsers became our collective memory of what was happening. Except that the browsers, and the internet itself, it doesn't have everything, that we have in our own minds. Um, we digitize very selectively, and but we are less selectively. We've been less selectively over time, and the internet actually changed the way that we actually record things, and in artificial intelligence made a huge change in the process as well. The first steps that we had was essentially we put things online. We created content, digital content online, and we digitized material. But now we actually went beyond just digitizing to actually datafying content, so that we could actually start searching and using content in a different way than before. In the beginning, because there's a huge gap, a lot of disparity on the internet in terms of who has compute capacities and who has the skill sets, and who actually can access the internet. In the beginning, it was even worse. Nowadays we have about 70% of humanity online already. It's 5.6 billion, if I'm not mistaken, out of the 8 billion that exists. Um, we have in the beginning we had quite a few less people online, and then therefore the content that was online was essentially the content that came from northern countries, from the US, from Europe, essentially, and with a lot less content having been recorded by other countries that had less computer capacity, less access to the internet, and so on. And so we end up with, for example, nowadays, 46% of the content that we have on the internet is actually in English, and very little content is in other languages. We have 7,061 languages, and in existence in the world, in use in the world, and actually less than 300 of those are in use online. And of course, we're seeing quite a lot of effort to increase that number of languages that are active that we can actually translate from one language to another. But still, we see, quite the vast majority of content that the internet has memorized in its 15.3 million websites. It's essentially, from a subset of the countries that are available and that exist. But we digitize, and we digitize with a lot of disparity as well, like I was saying, because we simply don't, not all countries have the capacity, but also, the digitization process itself is a costly process. It's and in the beginning, we ended up with um we using technologies that are nowadays quite obsolete already. So for example, I don't know about you guys, but raise your hand if you have CDs. If you have CDs, do you have CDs? I have 400 CDs and no CD player anymore. It used to be that computers came with a CD player. And nowadays, if you ask for one, people go, why do you need that? It's essentially we moved from, a technology that existed before that no longer exists, and a lot of the storage that this technology had, there's the capacity to store, was left behind, and a lot of the archives that were digitized already, were lost. Were lost, because this is no longer an accessible format, for most computers. And just like that kind of format became obsolete, there are quite a lot of different formats obsolete as well from the very beginning. Computers started. My first computer, my first personal computer that I used, it had recorded things on tape, and so those are gone, and so we lost quite a lot of what was memorized, and recorded in this kind of archive. And that's not the only gap that exists, in terms of storage. In terms of storage, collectively, we store less than 10%, we in data centers than what we actually produce, in terms of information or content. Now, I'm not going to even call it information because a lot of it is not necessarily information. It's content that we put on the internet. In 2010, already, about 15 years after the first browser, was made available, in 2010, we had 2 zettabytes of data online. A zettabyte being 1 trillion gigabytes, essentially. Now, we had in 2010, 2 zettabytes. In 2020, we had 64.2 zettabytes online. And in 2025, 5 years later, we are expected to have 181 zettabytes of content. So in 10 years, we went from 2 zettabytes to 64, and now in less than 5 years, we are going to multiply that by 3. So the amount of content that we produce with the number of people online is growing, at a pace that is incredible. But storing this content is highly expensive and very selective. So what we have online is not necessarily what we have in storage. In terms of data centers, for example, and those are very expensive technologies, and not only expensive in terms of the creation of the the tech itself, the infrastructure itself, that is very costly, but also environmentally costly in terms of water that it drinks, to cool the data centers, the energy. that it consumes to power these data centers for them to continue working. So digitization is a process that is incredibly expensive. So selection of what ends up stored is a process that is on a continuous based, making sure making a lot of what we produce being discarded, and that this discarding is not necessarily done by us. It's not a process that we select to do. It's by the organizations and the platforms that we use that end up making that kind of selection, what is worth keeping and what is getting thrown away on a daily on a continuous basis. So for every byte that we have to store nowadays, another byte has to be thrown away. So how do we select that? Organizations make that choice, and we end up not having access to a lot of information. We have the broken links that were mentioned, by in the beginning, by Bianca. We have a lot of this loss of content that we use to store in the cloud, or these were in different types of systems that end up obsolete and discarded and so on and so forth. But it's beyond that. It's digitization has this costly is this costly process, but datafication is a costly process as well. We need to be able to actually search this content, and the vast amounts of content that exist, to be able to be searchable, to be accessible, they have to become beyond just a record. They have to be a searchable record, and being searchable is a complex process as well. You actually have to datafy, create, index this kind of information, this kind of content, so that this content can then be accessed in different ways. And the process of indexing is very complex as well. It used to be, for example, that when we scanned text, for example, we scanned a book, that we took a picture of that book. Essentially, it was a digital Xerox copy of that book. It's not a searchable amount mechanism. You just have this kind of a picture. Now you actually, then we started using OCR technology, the optical character readers technology, that actually converted a page, instead of being just a picture, to reading the text and absorbing it. But not is even that, it became at some point the hard. So you actually had to index it in different ways, finding keywords, for example, for text, and it's so who decides those keywords? Who decides on what basis you access information on the internet? It is the kind of thing that when we start looking, we find all kinds of issues with that. For example, I don't know whether you're familiar with a the ImageNet, data set, which was a data set created. I think it was Harvard, that created this data set, and started, putting a big set of pictures, together, and somebody had to figure out a way of making sure that uh, this data was searchable. And so they started labeling the pictures, and the labeling pictures became an issue that brought in all kinds of biases and discrimination. And for example, it would look at the faces of people that are black or brown, or faces that are not the typical blonde, blue-eyed Northern, and label them in different, as in many derogatory ways. Hypersexualizing, women, for example, women of color, or calling men of color, with a criminality linked, associations and so on and so forth. So that's the kind of thing that ended up happening. And then when we search for these images, when we try to recall the memories that these images, encode, you end up bringing this biases in as well. So you have all kinds of issues with digitization. Then you have the process of datafication, and then you actually try to generate, nowadays we use this vast amount of data to generate uh, um, applications, for example, using, to generate generative AI, artificial intelligence, large language models, diffusion models, and so on. And those encode, this datafication um, mechanisms that are quite biased, quite um, 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 disrespectful, actually, of different cultures, and are keeping content from cultures that are not necessarily, representative of all the cultures of the world. So we end up with generative AI, a set of collective memories on the internet, and particularly in data centers, that are not, the memories that we put in, the content that we put in, and then, we end up with this content that is coming out that is not necessarily. It's a kind of pasteurized, amalgamated, average, content that is not the memory of the world, but it's the memory of everyone, and it's not respectful of cultural heritage and cultural precedents. But this is what we have online. And of course, generative AI, it actually generates content as well. And the generation of content by generative AI actually creates tremendous issues on memory that we collectively have on the internet. First, it hallucinates. It creates information, quote, or content of things that never happened. It doesn't exist and don't exist. It doesn't have any links to reality or to facts. It simply predicts, the next image, or the next pixel, or the next word, and so it predicts, those, and end up creating, citations of books that don't exist, pictures of events that never happened, and so on. And actually, historians are many of those are actually using, the images to illustrate, generating images to illustrate uh, episodes in history that had no photograph, of them happening, before photography was invented. So you actually now have pictures of, that never existed, of an event, and and those pictures are incredibly um, biased as well. For example, generative AI. One of the things that it's interesting. It's just generates on the basis of what exists. There are quite a few tests, for example, about for trying to generate images of black doctors treating white children in hospitals. It happens every day, but generative AI has enormous difficulties, creating this kind of image. So, but it has, incredible ease. It makes it easy for you to create, for example, images of Indians, in the U.S., wearing, traditional clothing, and sitting around negotiating treaties with cowboy dressed white men in 16th century. Say, so it's not accurate, and we end up with these images polluting our environment as well. So we have hallucination, which is the unintended creation of, fact-free, content, what I call the fact-free. Then you have actual intentional creation of content that is also fact-free. It's not linked to reality. And then you have actually malignant kind of distribution of this, which is misinformation, disinformation, which is actually created, with the intention of to deceive. And so we actually spit it all out on the internet again, and we keep polluting our information environment to the point that now, we have on the process of digitization, datafication, and usage of this information online. The biggest skill that we need to have is actually the skill to verify, to say, is this real, is this true? And how do you do that is becoming more and more difficult, exactly because of the broken links and the disappearing behind paywalls of uh, content that is trustworthy, so such as content from media organizations that have to charge, for this presentation of this content in order for them to survive. Instead of what platforms do in presenting information to us, with by that they monetize through ads and other means such as that. So yeah, we live in a completely different world, from when you could just Google it, when actually search engines are using generative AI to hallucinate results and offer them to us, including as a first option. So we don't have the memories of humans anymore. We have, content generated by computers being presented to us as, the quote collective memory of the world. We need to be very, very cognizant, very, very we need to really understand the impact that this has on everything we do. The devaluing of science, for example. If facts can be mixed up with non-facts, with fact-free content such as that, what is the value of the trustworthy organizations that use to generate content for us, science, media, authorities, and so on. They're becoming less trustworthy as well, simply because we cannot differentiate between content that is generated, that is part of our collective memory, that is fact-based, evidence-based content, to something that is being put on the internet by some artificial entity. So just some provocation to start, because I think that this is one of the most important topics that we have. How do we preserve the the validity, the reliability of our information environment? This is the question that we have, for the next few years. Is the most important question that we could, be discussing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mariels. I'm assuming that we should now pass to the next speaker, which is Ricardo Pimenta. So, Ricardo Pimenta, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Juliano. So, good morning. I'd like to begin by thanking CGI for the invitation, and also the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation of Brazil for this honor of representing it. So, to begin with, let me share a popular Yoruba saying from Brazil's Afro-Brazilian culture that says, Eshu killed a bird yesterday with the stone he threw today. So, Eshu, we know, it is a figure of movement and transition in Yoruba mythology, bridges the human and divine, enabling communication and connecting them. This notion of interconnectedness reminds us that maintaining and developing connections in our digitized world is both our responsibility and a challenge, even when the connection is between past and present. In fact, in our current digital reality, these connections generate immense data and information raising pressing questions. What should be preserved, and how do we distinguish the essential from the superfluous? The challenge of maintaining collective memory has grown exponentially. We now face a flood of disorganized and even lost data stored across countless devices, complicating retrieval and comprehension. For public policy, this issue is particularly urgent, given the unprecedented speed and volume of data production in the past 3 decades. So memory, as highlighted in the Yoruba saying, it isn't just about the past. It is actively constricted in the present. Remembering today shapes our understanding of yesterday, and memory itself is updated and rewritten in real time. In Brazil, the time has come to think about yesterday's bird. So memory, it's a political agenda, not just a cultural one, which should primarily unite public and third sector institutions, so that doesn't end up being driven mostly by the market, leading to what Andreas Hussein has described as a Disneyification of memory, which through its overexploitation would also invite us to greater collective and irremediable forgetfulness. This has profound implications for public and collective memory in the digital age. We must approach it ethically, curating what is preserved while recognizing that not everything can be saved. Social platforms like Instagram or Facebook, for example, add complexity as the content they host belongs to the owners, including disinformation and toxic narratives. This threatens the representations of our past and present, and meanwhile, Brazil's more than 5.3 million internet domains contribute every day to the vastness of this challenge. Sorry. To tackle this, initiatives by institutions like IBICT, the Brazilian Institute of Information Science and Technology, where I am a researcher and currently the teaching and researching coordinator, provide some valuable examples. First of all, I can speak something about the Tainacan software. The Tainacan is a software who digitizes and systematizes cultural collections from IFAM, that is an institute for our historical and artistic heritage, National Institute, and the IBRAM, that is an institute from Brazilian museums. So ensuring the Tainacan could ensure access to museums and memory institutions. This is one example that are developed in IBICT inside the Ministry of Science, Technology, and Innovation. The second is the Cariniana network. That is a network who preserves over 700 open access electronic journals, automating processes like storage and validation. The third is the arquivo.gov. It's a kind of a pilot project that archived nearly all Brazilian government websites in 2021, with plans for user-driven website collection and preservation inspired by models like the arquivo.pt and the Internet Archive, but more the experience of arquivo.pt is the reference for us. And last, the Tempora. Tempora is a digital tool developed in a digital humanities laboratory in IBICT. It is a platform for archiving and visualizing digital information in the form of a timeline, which during the 2022 presidential elections, we started publications from fact-checking agencies with the intention of creating a timeline of disinformation events and contributing to the memory of that event in the midst of this disinformation fever we are experiencing globally. So these efforts showcase IBIC's potential leadership in preserving Brazilian internet memory, but broader challenges will remain, particularly regarding who preserves the entirety of Brazil's online presence and how storage limitations are addressed. The issue recalls the Argentine writer José Luis Borges, who wrote Funes de Memorios, where the desire to remember everything leads always to a paralysis. Memory thrives in balance between remembering and forgetting, recovery and erasure. The technological promise to store everything is illusory. We must curate what defines the memory of the internet, shaping what is remembered and what is not. To do this, two challenges stand out. The first is about management, in my perspective. The challenge of memory today is its management, its control in a scenario where space and time are atomized and the volume of information expands entropically, invites us to feel this kind of Freudian death drive intimately that pushes us to confront, to innovate, and generally to the vibrant creation of means, techniques, strategies, policies, and practices capable of making us overcome it one day at a time. The second could be about governance, a good one that is capable of circumscribing different actors, able to decide what to preserve and who makes those decisions. This isn't just a technical issue, but a political and institutional one requiring ethical collaborative solutions. Furthermore, if the object we are looking at is the internet, how will any proposal to preserve its memory ever be able to progress without thinking about the mechanisms that need to be aligned with the devices, actors, and institutions that regulate it? So, in my perspective, governance could play one singular role to keep proper access to information and freedom of expression without major ethical complications, and transgenerational public and collective memory mediated by information and communication technologies that are now in different parts of our private and public daily lives. In closing, I return to the Yoruba saying, the actions we take today to preserve the internet's memory will determine if the bird was indeed killed or not yesterday. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. I just gave the floor to Ricardo without presenting Ricardo. Then I'm sorry, and I'm doing it justice now. Ricardo is currently the coordinator of teaching and research in information and science and technology at the Brazilian Institute of Science and Technology, and he's a permanent professor at the postgraduate program in information science at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. Ricardo has been a full research at the Brazilian Institute of Information Science and Technology, BIC, since February 2013. Sorry, Ricardo, and thank you so much for your insightful thoughts. Then I give the floor to Samik Karel. Samik is a journalist and researcher from Kathmandu at Nepal, with over a decade experience in reporting on contemporary issues for national and international media. He has contributed to leading research institutions focused on technology, ethics, and human rights. Karel has received a multiple international fellowship and grants, and he teaches critical thinking at University at university while exploring electronic music. Karel, thank you for your participation. The floor is yours.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah. So yeah, thank you very much. Hello to everyone at the IGF in Riyadh. From myself, enjoying a sunny winter afternoon in Kathmandu, at least a couple of minutes back. I'm overwhelmed to be a part of this esteemed panel. I would like to thank the CZI for this wonderful opportunity to talk about collective memories in digital realms. I think it's the collective memories that have actually brought us together, our past activities that's on the internet. And so, yeah, although this is a very deep and awesome to dive in, I would like to start very general and narrow my interest towards my own expertise and probably my geographic reason as well. So yeah, just an anecdote to start with. When I was very young, I was given a chalk and a slate, like by my parents, and a formidable technology at that time to write and learn first alphabets. It was not very long ago, but it was like 3 decades back. And I thought it was the most convenient tool because I could scribble on it, write anything. And if I didn't like it, I could erase it as well, because this tool was very ephemeral. So I don't remember what I scribbled then, like not much memories of it, except writing a few alphabets and maybe like scribbling some Mickey Mouses and Donald Ducks. But passing this phase, I was given a notebook and a pencil. Now I was told I was to have more structures, like write between the lines, do this, do that, be more disciplined, and only erase the errors. A little bit later, like a few years after the pencil, I was given a pen, a more permanent. It was an idea which gave me more permanence, and what I scribbled stayed a little bit longer. There were no traces of my chalk and slate experiences. And now, still now, although I don't find anything else in my basement, in my parents' basement, I still find like some scribbles of whatever I did with the pen and pencils, so yeah, I mean, that's how I would like to start, and how these were my memories, and that were kept in like shoe boxes in my parents' basement. And probably many of these contexts you can relate to as a collective memory yourself. So we have a tendency to save and retrieve our memories as desired, and as memories play a huge role in construction of our identities. So fast forward to my teens. So like we get a computer with a little bit of access to the internet. A little bit later, there are more restricted endeavors. I was being watched by my guardians to go there, not to go there. Probably being logged and being checked my history. Compared to the more analog past I had, the internet seemed to make everything present. Even the past was so well weaved with the present, everything now felt like a block. This is likely because at present, our memory function is increasingly organized via media systems, specifically digital media, and which has become very integrated. This integrated media system internalizes the main functions as cultural memory now, which has become a focal point of the documentation system of the past and the present. Example, like now I use Google Photos and it gives me 7 years back memories. You're in the ocean and today you're in the ocean. So you, I mean, you're doing well, or I don't know. Yeah, this is how you tag your memories with these tokens. So coming again to an adage, what they say, like the internet never forgets, but people do. And when people do, then internet actually rightly reminds you again that you have not forgotten. And so now, with internet and digital technologies, and in particular, internet and web-based information and communication technologies, our memories, our collective memories are formed and shaped during the digital era. While internet systems have enabled kind of democratization of memory, with like everyone with basic technology and internet, like devices can produce their own content, promote it on the web, while now the big part is many who have been left behind, as even with the lack of basic technologies and infrastructures, are not being able to do so. One of my country and the reason and the majority world chronicles these digital divides, which majorly still affects already vulnerable population and the marginalized ones in our region and my country. So this region witnesses particularly of a patriarchy on internet, as well as majority of narratives and discourses are still male dominated. Like all these narratives, discourses coming from political institutions, parties, universities are still very patriarchal. That's what I feel. The same population which actually did not have cameras, books, access to libraries, information, newspapers, access to education, basic healthcare, they're the same population who don't have access to the internet, which is really sad. Their memories have never been documented. Rather, sometimes they've been part of subaltern narratives which have been seen by others and brought out to the world. While this divide is closing in data with more access to technology, the debates on what we call meaningful, uninterrupted access still lingers. That's where we stand in this region, particularly Nepal, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and the rest of South Asia. So like where we lag is like, while social media helps forming collective communities, you have like games, people who play games, different interest groups who don't have to be face-to-face. These vulnerable populations are still left out of discourse. They don't know what's happening, where they are, where they stand in this technological world, which was supposedly principled under democratization and participation of collective memory making. So yeah, coming forward, like the process of creating, storing, managing, removing, manipulating digital data. Now, let's talk about public data and collective memory. So like where we stand right now in the digital age, collective memory are often intertwined with the data we generate, from the photos we post online to the interactions we have in social media. This raises concerns about who controls our public collective memory, how it is used, whether it is a subject to manipulation, and most likely we are very vulnerable when it comes to the government using our data. And with the lack of very comprehensive data policies, mostly in this part of the world and elsewhere too, there's a lack of accountability. While the governments have been proactively using available technologies to collect data, data from the citizens, there has been less accountability of where this data is being used, where it is being stored, for what purposes, for how long, how it will be used, in what cases it will not be used. There has been no accountable answers to these. There have been several breaches and leakages of data and personal information, personal data. Example, I would like to give a few examples of the election data that was collected, but that was breached and used for other things. The government yet to realize the value of people's data and being accountable for it. Also, data being collected for one purpose and being used for another one, like you use for national, like a national demographic population data for something else. You give it to like some marketeers, corporate houses for their own benefits. So that is another problem. Also, data being also other sensitive cases of data collection and retrieval being procured to other countries because we don't have the expertise to manage our own data, which keeps us very vulnerable position in the absence of a comprehensive data law. Then again, there's like the trustworthiness of social media platforms, which have been pretty active in most of these countries. While we're using social media platforms in our day-to-day activities, from our information sources to businesses, we tend to use all this like big social media as vital tool for our information, for even for our businesses, but no one questions the trustworthiness of it. The government has tried to grip the social media companies in this part of the world and other places as well, asking them to work in coordination, filter harmful data against national integrity and national interest, and also establish a focal communication person so that they can actually be in touch with these companies. Few companies like TikTok, which was banned in Nepal, and some other countries in South Asia have also adhered to the government's proposal, established a focal person, worked with the government for data breaches, but still it's in a very nascent phase. TikTok was banned by government of Nepal, which has been lifted after they agreed to set up their centers and go accordingly. Also, the rise of misinformation in the platforms is ever increasing. Political parties and political wings are using the internet and social media to change narratives that have been abundant, which is like everywhere, especially during the crisis, which is crisis during elections or some natural disasters or the pandemics. Whitewashing, smear campaigning, conspiracy theories, and area of these enforced to collective memories. At the same time, memories shared publicly in social media have also been very crucial during natural disasters and pandemics. I'm not saying all is bad. There's good things as well. The recent floods, the use of social media, and the posts made by citizens actually helped rescue many people as well. Also coming back, like as a journalist, I need to bring this together, the best example of consolidated open source, what we say is Wikipedia, which does not conform to historical recording practices. However, internet as a whole and social media are also a great tool for open source. Now, as a journalist reporting with limited resources from this country, not being able to travel everywhere on foot, I think open source has been very crucial to my covers on very sensitive issues. It gives me multiple perspectives, angles, diverse ideas, and approach to report. I think it's a marvel for modern age journalism if you know how to use it. So yeah, the future, I have been closely following the LLMs, and as Mariella also pointed out, how it's going to herald new ecosystem for the collective memory. Is it going to be the future of collective memory is a question. Particularly generative AI seems to have taken a technological leap, and with building new infrastructures for memory, while it also enables combination of various diverse and counter memories. Now LLMs are being used to memorialize chat with historical figures and philosophers, bringing them from past life. There's this Silicon Valley Thego of saying long-termism and yeah, memorializing someone so you can talk to Rousseau, even if you use that I don't know, many 100 years back. So the Rousseau chatbot becomes more dynamic, engaging in public memory with other interactions with other people. Quite exciting times, even those the saturated discourses are likely to be dynamic again. So while AI could be the future of collective memories, it could be crucial to ensure participation of marginalized communities from the global south in progress towards inclusion and multilingualism and multiculturalism. That's what I think. So we cannot be left behind, our already vulnerable community is getting more vulnerable without the lack of internet, with the lack of internet and connected infrastructures. So I would like to end there, and I would like to discuss more when given. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samik. As we are advancing to the closing of the session, I go straight to Carlos Afonso. Carlos Afonso has a master degree in economics from University of Toronto, also a doctoral studies in social political through thought at the same university. He has worked in human development field since the early 70s. He's co-founder of the Association for Progressive Communication, APC. He coordinated the ECHO 92 Internet project with APC and United Nations. He's member of the United Nations Working Group on Internet Governance. He was member. He's a special advisor of the Internet Governance Forum. He was in 2007. He was member of the UNCTAD expert group on ICT and poverty alleviation. He was member of the UNCSTD working group on enhanced cooperation. He was member of the multi-stakeholder advisory group of the IGF. He is co-founder and member of the Brazilian Internet Steering Committee, and he is co-founder and chair of the Brazilian chapter of Internet Society. And finally, he's a director of the New Path Institute in Rio de Janeiro. So, yeah, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Do you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we hear, but with a little bit of noise, but yes.
Okay, let me see if I can switch my mic.
I'm sorry, we are having difficulty to listen.
Yes.
Oh,
can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect, great.
Okay, thank you. Well, good morning. Good morning, right? You are no. It's still morning there. No, it's not. It is, yes. So it's 5 in the morning here. So, well, you probably are looking at a map that is from Wikipedia, which I posted there. And the map, as most maps are, is distorted, benefiting the northern hemisphere. So the northern hemisphere shows much bigger than the southern hemisphere. No? But the important thing is the countries painted green are the countries which have significant internet archiving services. Like the Internet Archive, like many other efforts to archive the Internet. Countries below the equator, which takes most of South America, and also the Caribbean and Mexico, there is no indexing of the Internet in those countries. When I say there is no indexing, I say there is no significant indexing, which is worth mentioning. There are experimental ones. We are a small institute are doing a project like that, but it's too small to figure in the map. No, in Africa you have only one country with an important indexing service, internet indexing, web indexing service, which is Egypt. And why Egypt? Because they have the Alexandria Library, which does internet archiving. Wonderful. No? But it's only Egypt in the entire Africa. No? In the southern hemisphere, you have only Australia and New Zealand doing significant internet archiving. So this is a major challenge for the southern countries in the so-called global south, no? And we need to address that because we are losing a lot of information because as other speakers mentioned, the information on the internet is anything but eternal. It disappears, and many government sites disappear when political issues arise, no? And this happened recently in Brazil. Several sites almost disappeared. We are trying in Brazil, there are initiatives, but are not at the scale which could be present in that map. but there are initiatives trying to do something. And one of them is our small institute, which we call the Graúna project. Graúna is a bird with a strong, tremendous resistance to environmental challenges and so on. And it's also a figure of a famous cartoon in Brazil, which represented people, impoverished people in the northeast of Brazil. So we use the name Graúna to represent our project of trying to do indexing of the internet in Brazil. And it has two components. One of them is indexing based on the technologies used by the Internet Archive, by arquivo.pt, which is the major indexer in Portuguese language, but does not index Brazil, index only Portugal, and several others which use open source technology and the reproducible technology to index the internet. And this Graúna project also includes a local server, a very small server, which is a small box which you can carry in your with you anywhere, which has a copy of many information systems which are there to be used in remote communities which have poor or no connectivity to the internet. So they have a reproduction of Wikipedia in Portuguese, for instance, in this box, and several other facilities, information facilities. So this is part also for Graúna project. You know? And what are we doing right now is the project is in an experimental phase and trying to protect content relevant to the democratic processes, which is a potential target of hacker attacks, censorship, political pressure, or eventually, which cannot be backed up satisfactorily. No? The Graúna archive stores websites selecting and using using a methodology that prioritizes qualitative interviews and analysis of the political scenario. It is very experimental. In this experimental phase, some priority areas are defined, like environment, health, culture, human rights. And but we have defined in principle 18 thematic areas to index. You know? And the challenges we are confronting are quite interesting, and we had to do it to understand why people are not indexing the internet. And now we know it's very difficult. It's a big challenge. No? We have created several interesting features in the system for archiving, like the ability to belong to a group of users. For example, if a research group wants to have multiple users, creating archives for the same project in the system. Ability to schedule recurring archiving to maintain different versions, display of archiving date and time, which is typical of the major internet archives. No? And we have defined, to begin, 18 themes from culture to government, racial equality, gender, elections, communication, etc., etc. In recent years, there have been several cases of removal of or alteration of the content of public information, as well as deliberate attacks on web pages. There are also frequent reports from civil society about greater difficulty in accessing previously available public information. Despite some relevant experiences in the academic field, for instance, at the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul, there is an initiative, an indexing initiative. Brazil still lacks permanent projects aimed at archiving the web on a scale compatible with the breadth and reach of the internet in Brazil. Disappearance of information in all elections due to poor management or incorrect application of electoral law is an issue which has to be considered. And Graona started in 2018, and we managed to get some funding from the Open Society, the Media Democracy Fund, and others to help us start the project. We have support from NIC.br with equipment and from the National Research Network, which provides connectivity to our project. So, and we conducted about 60 interviews about threatened websites, relevant content, security of their own websites. And we also had a legal context document prepared by our lawyer and regarding archiving of content which may be challenged by the actual owners of these contents. And this is a challenge that has to be contemplated in these projects. No? In 2022 and 2023, we improved the infrastructure to ensure the necessary conditions for the system to run securely. And part of it is to provide almost real-time backup of the system, which is one major challenge. If the main data center fails, you have to have a backup to run immediately, almost immediately. And this is also a challenge that has to be contemplated. You know? We initially had 18 themes active with 227 archived sites and more than 100 .gov.br sites, government sites archived. That was especially important because there was a political transition in Brazil in which many of these government sites were challenged or disappeared. No? The scale of indexing is much smaller than the Internet Archive and the others. And at this stage of the project, is specifically aimed at preserving content at risk for several reasons. No? It's also an experiment that seeks to address the challenge of indexing content that is publicly available, but often extremely difficult to capture. There are several reasons: use of increasingly complex technologies, frequent changes in the technologies used, huge databases, sites with multiple depth levels, many other challenges. There is the possibility of archiving that is not made public. It's one of the features that we managed to install in the system, which is useful, for example, for the storing of sites that promote disinformation and that we do not want to multiply but can preserve. There is still controversy, however, about the use of archiving as forensic evidence. Preservation of dialogues in Brazil about preservation of web contents are happening in the sessions, in dialogues and meetings of academics and other interest groups in Brazil since at least 2019. And this, and we are discussing this now here at the IGF. No? And in the IGF, there is, I understand, an intersessional initiative, a policy network dedicated to highlighting best practices for preserving and creating local content. And a major challenge, for instance, for the original idioms, languages, which are a challenge in our region, especially. We are finishing the first version of the software of the system, Graona, and will be available on GitHub for free development using application by other organizations and also by the public authorities. And we are organizing a permanent curation team or committee to preserve more sites and review archiving criteria, which is a big challenge. The criteria for archiving, which was mentioned here by, I think, Maria Elsa. And advanced research on public debate on the formats to archive, which have to be compatible with several library and other standards. advanced debate on the authenticity of archives in WARC format so that they can constitute evidence, establish support partnership to advance the development of the project, and train people to perform archiving, hire a team to perform more complex or large volume archiving, further improvement in the usability of the tool, which is already online, by the way, keep the system up to date in light of the constant transformation of the web, and expand the infrastructure to increase processing and storage capacity. Preserving content in any language is a complex challenge. Brazil currently has more than 300 indigenous ethnic groups with more than 270 languages, all of which are at risk of disappearing, and with them an entire culture disappears. Similar challenges occur in other Latin America, in other countries, in the Portuguese-speaking countries, and so on. How can internet resources be used to support the preservation and continuity of these languages and cultures? It is a big challenge. That's it. Thank you. I talk too much. Here are the address of our institute is nupef.org.br. I will put this in the chat. Okay, and the address of the Graúna project is grauna.org.br. I'll put there as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carlos Afonso. We have one question from the online audience, and I would ask if someone here in the room would like to have a question. Oh, we have a question here.
Hi, I am a researcher based in Germany. I'd like to ask Ricardo, can you hear me? Okay, so you mentioned, the link between memory or political agenda or collective memory and the elections in Brazil. Can you give us some examples to elaborate how collective memory has been used and or has impacted the results of the elections in Brazil? I also have a question for the journalist from Nepal. Can you give us some examples of the relations between whitewashing and a collective memory, and if possible, could you give us examples from Nepal? And I would like to give, I'm sorry, but I forgot the name of the first speaker, the only female speaker in the room. Okay. If you can hear me, actually, I'm also working on collective memory. And when it comes to the deaf people in famine and in natural disasters in the past, I couldn't find the number of, dead female bodies, just because in the past, only for each households, males' dead bodies were counted. What would you suggest me doing to counter this challenge? And that is, I think that is also the question for all the panelists. There was no data on certain issues in the past, and maybe when you apply for funding, when you talk to your editors, when you talk to your bosses to convince someone of your research proposals, they would ask you, where's your data? What do you get data from? And in case when there is no data due to historical injustices, what would you do? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marcelo Fornazin from Oswaldo Cruz Foundation and CGI.br. Thank you for the very interesting interventions. And I was thinking about the interventions. You mentioned public institutions, NGOs, or civil society institutions looking for memory. Open source initiatives also are very interesting. But I found it is a lack of business interest on memory, like companies. Compared to Marielza said that technology are expensive and indexing expensive, we see on business today people saying that cloud storage and cloud processing, it's cheap. So what I feel after this is that you have technologies that are cheap for business interests, for producing products and private services, and expensive for memory. And I'd like you to comment about that, because we see that you have technology for private interests that are cheap and available, but when you think on public interest, when there is no market interest, and they're not thinking only on states, but on the public, the common goods and the public interest, we don't have investments of states or even of business. I'd like to comment this difference between the access and availability of technology for private interests and public interests like memory. We have this hard way to do that.
Hi, I am Alex Mora, originally from Brazil. I work here in Saudi Arabia currently in the Chaos University, and I have a question for Carlos Afonso. As I have a past working back in RMP, the Brazilian Academic Network, I am aware of the challenges that happen in the science and education area, where people struggle to also have data for scientific purposes, for educational purposes in universities, in research institutions. And this brought me a recollection that this is an open problem in Brazil, that we don't have a specific institution towards storage or preservation, digital preservation. So how are you tackling this part of the problem of the storage capacity for the Graúna project, and what are your thoughts on how Brazil and other countries can address the problem of the storage capacity for many purposes, not only for internet memory, but also for scientific education and cultural and arts and etc.
We have one question that we received from the online audience. I think I will also pose this question because then we can give the floor to all of the speakers to answer them. So Dr. T.V. Gopal from Anna University in Chennai, India, he says, public memory is short. Internet memory is seldom so. Any solutions for this mismatch hazard in the geopolitical space?
Well, we have very good question in very short time. Then I would ask panelists to make their final remarks, trying to address the questions, which are very important and interesting. But I would also be have to ask you to not go further 3 minutes, because we'll have to close the session very soon. Then we could start from backwards with Carlos Alberto Afonso, and then Samik, and then Marcelo, Ricardo Pimenta,
Okay.
and then Marielza, please. Afonso, Carlos Afonso, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. A good question. I recall that the Graúna project is an experiment, still an experiment, exactly to measure the difficulties which you mentioned, among others. Like, for instance, backing up in real time is a tremendous challenge. The cost of doing that is already very expensive, in a big scale. That's why we restricted the breadth of the information that the project can capture to mostly civil society organizations, web information. And on the basis of this experiment, we'll try to progressively expand. But of course, considering that this means more storage, more memory, and more backup, which is tremendous, tremendous. The challenge is tremendous. Our idea with the project is also to provide a sort of small reference, but useful reference for an organization that could tackle the challenge in full and really do a Brazilian Internet Archive. And I have to say that one of the organizations that has these resources to do that, especially technical resources, is nic.br. And we do hope that they consider this in the future. Thank you.
Samik, please.
Hi, thank you. I would just like to address the question from the lady in Germany. She asked about political parties and political memory and whitewashing, I think. So, like, it's been a common trend for major political parties in Nepal, and then the reason to deploy what you call the cyber army. So what they do is look around the internet and like if there's any criticisms about them or if there's any critical discourse about them, they document that and they go to make a counter argument against that to make their image better. It's very common for them to do that these days and to inject some populist ideas and go against whatever is trendy. So that's how it works. Anyway, finally, speaking of collective memory, with the ubiquity of internet, the way we're accessing collective memory, storing, discovering, and retrieving these collective memories has changed with the emergent technologies. The way we interact with our memories has changed, and I think it'll keep on changing with the advent of LLMs and generative AI. Mainly social media and platformizations have also augmented new ways to approaching these memories by allowing us to actively contribute to them, making collective memories more interactive and collaborative now. However, we should be careful to ensure everyone has equal access and infrastructures to these. There should be accountability of our data, and the future should be shared, equal, and be democratic, and bring together all marginalized and vulnerable populations of the majority world together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samik. Please, Thiago, Ricardo, Pimenta. I'm sorry.
Okay, so I will try to answer in one brief. So about the question about elections. The memory is always a place of struggle, political struggle. Many people tell about the cultural side of memory, but okay, that is okay. It exists, obviously, but even the cultural side of memory, if we can talk about this, is a result from political struggles about power. So how it impacts precisely related to the fact that it is potentially violated or rewritten as a field of dispute by those who seek to dispute the discourse on fruit, political past, science, and so on. And let me tell you something about the tool I was talking about, the Tempora. The Tempora, this digital tool, was created during the COVID-19 pandemic in Brazil. From 2019 until mid-2022, we collected there with this digital tool almost 6,000 notices from media in Brazil, Brazilian media. Stories about how COVID spread in Brazil, something like that. And obviously, the Brazilian media that didn't have a paywall. So, in the process, most of the news stories produced by the Ministry of Health in Brazil and other Brazilian government bodies, websites, had their links broken. In 2019, this happened very quickly. And then we realized that this back in 2019, we tried to develop the system so that we could save an image, a kind of PDF website, and also scrap the entire corpus of news that soon tended to disappear. So how the question of memory could impact the elections, for example. The elections is a place of struggle, dispute about discourse, about the past, the near past, and about projects of future. So we can afford this kind of thing, and we need to develop some strategies to avoid that this kind of discourse could stay in some groups, some political groups that could do all bad things that we almost know, we already know that they are. So the other thing that I think I can answer about the question of data and so on, it's a perspective about algorithmic governmentality. It's a kind of new regime of truth. So about data, I think our biggest danger is the automation of social existence. I think we are all talk about that. Automation of social existence through computational process deployed in online media. Its memory that comes from it will not be a memory preserved by the demands and conflicts of social groups, institutions or cultural practices. This kind of memory, rather it will be mathematically elaborated by algorithmic devices that are, in turn, programmed by groups such the acronym GAFAMI, that is Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, and IBM. So in the end, the perspective of a political surveillance that we are talking about here today, we know that is something that we must fight against. But the surveillance by the market, many of us let it be, let this kind of thing happens. So this is correct. Is this correct? I think there is a kind of reification of the practice when we just give to GAFAMI, for example, our data in change of visual and informational kinds of consume. So look, I don't agree with any kind of surveillance, but it's a fact that we all practice it on different scales. The culture of following on social networks, the culture of attention, that we all share a little bit more, a little bit less, are surveillance practice also. So that we carry out intimately and in a veiled way. So I find this paradigm difficult to overcome, and right now the answer is that I don't know how we can solve this problem. But I know that in starts these types of questions is important.
Okay. Ricardo, thank you so much. And then we close the session with Maria Elza Oliveira. Please, Maria Elza, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Juliano. Well, it was a fabulous exchange. Thank you very much for this. I'm going to close with a very simple thing. Curation is a political economic process. It's as simple as that. We have to ask, whose memory is being preserved, and why do we care to preserve memory now? See, if we didn't care so much before, and the proof that we didn't care so much before is simply that physical archives are being let to rot. essentially. You go into warehouses of documents that are, exposed to floods and fires and mildew and simply neglect, and we haven't really digitized everything that should have been digitized, since the beginning. One of the simplest statistics is that about 40% of the birth records of people above 60 years of age are still on paper and not digitized. It's simply because there's this tremendous backlog of content that have never been digitized to begin with. And we simply don't do it. We don't get to it. We keep looking at the, creation of digital records, new digital records, the birth records of the young children that are born now, but we forget that we haven't done it, equally for everyone, that we left behind the older generations, for example, since they didn't, start with digital archives to begin with. So we have to really ask this question, and the reason why we are caring so much about, digitization right now, the preservation of memory, is that we found that it has a value, a monetary value, because the point is not to preserve memory. The point is to create data that then feeds into generative AI and other, mechanisms such as that, that then can be monetized and drive the economy for other reasons, uh, um, for other purpose. We are looking at the AI, not at the memory. But we need to really ask, about the memory. How do we preserve it? And as a matter of fact, there are very simple things that need to be done. First, we need to digitize more. Close the digitization divide that exists. For example, the content for older generations that is still, on paper, or if it's not on paper, has been digitized, is on outdated, obsolete formats that need to be brought into, this new format. Then we need to look at this issue of indexing that was mentioned before. The fact that we need to really think about how, we create the mechanisms for searchable data, because just creating data is insufficient. We need to look at searchable data and the cleaning up of, quite a lot of content that is, literally toxic, or, cleaning up and separation of this content. We have already the common crawl, which is done once a month, about once a month, crawling the entire internet. So for Global South, developing the technologies and the methodologies to really mine the common crawl, to extract what is the collective memory in particular countries, would be a huge thing. But we also need to build capacities of people, to preserve their own memories, because we don't we can't just preserve memory for somebody else. We need to allow them, to give them the tools to preserve their own memories, the ones that are meaningful for them. Because actually, the terrible thing is that only 2% of what gets on the internet, gets preserved hardcore, and only about 10% get preserved overall. It's increasing, because more data centers are being built, because companies such as the GAFAM are really investing to the point that they are building nuclear reactors to power these data centers. They value it so much. But we need to value our own memories as well as, the Global South, and think about where do we store it in terms of data sovereignty as well. How do we keep access to these memories if, and to this content, if it ends up being, switched off somewhere else, and that degrades the quality of our own, collective memories in different countries. So I'm going to stop here and say thank you for the chance to have this fabulous conversation.
Thank you so much, Maria Elsa. Thank you, all panelists, Ricardo, Samik, Carlos Afonso. We had a great panel, and this is a first initiative to debate the challenges related to memory, the collective memory online. Hope that we can have further discussions in considering this event, which is in the core of internet governance, on this debate. Thank you, and we now finish the session. Thanks a lot for everyone.